How often do you think about the Oscars? About how many Oscar-winning films there are and how many you've seen? Yeah, there's a few famous Oscar-winning films that we've all seen. You know, The Godfather and Lord of the Rings and Titanic. I'm King of the World, all that stuff. But the Oscars have been running since 1927. There are currently over 1,000 films, feature-length films, which have won an Oscar. How many have you seen? I did the numbers for myself. It's not many, and I consider myself quite a movie buff. So here then is the premise of this podcast. Every episode, I and a rotating cast of two guests will randomly select one of the 1,000 films that have won an Oscar, watch it, and talk about it, with the only requirement being that one of the three people on each episode has to have never seen the movie before we talk about it. That will get difficult with Star Wars. Please note that our coverage of a movie does not constitute an endorsement of it. My least favorite movie of 2016, David Ayer's Suicide Squad, won an Oscar for Best Makeup, while my favorite movie of 2016, The Handmaiden, wasn't even nominated for anything. Please also note that our coverage of a movie is not a blanket endorsement of any or all of the people involved in it. A lot of terrible people have won Oscars. Kevin Spacey won an Oscar 20 years before he was outed as an abuser, and Roman Polanski won one 20 years after. But every film, good, bad, or in many cases mediocre, that has won an Oscar is an important part of film history just for being there. And they all, on some level, deserve a tiny bit of consideration, even if that consideration ends up concluding that it's garbage. And with all of that in mind, I am your host, as always, Ellie McConaughey, and with me today is Connor Duffy.
I am here. That is certainly true. I am here and I am present. Uh, I have seen things and now I am here to talk about them.
And Todd B.
Hello. I feel like a more chipper greeting doesn't really fit Bergman.
No, it doesn't. And we, speaking of Ingmar Bergman, are here today to talk about Cries and Whispers, the 1972 Ingmar Bergman film that won Best Cinematography at the 46th Academy Awards, but was nominated for a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, nominated for what was it like? Yeah, nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I know that people still go to bat for Parasite correctly, but that's pretty rare for foreign films. They don't usually like to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Though they've been getting more comfortable with it lately, Parasite and Drive My Car and Amelia Perez.
Netflix money will do that.
2 out of 3. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. 66% is a passing grade.
I mean, we've had some others that have been up the past couple of years. Like Anatomy of a Fall was up there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
I was gonna immediately say, so are you quoting the philosopher Meatloaf when you say that?
Oh yeah. No, I am not. I would do anything for love, but the rest of the joke.
You don't know the I so this is, as indicated, an Ingmar Bergman film, and as I sort of joked about with Todd at the end of the last episode, that means it's gonna be huge downer.
This is, I think, my fifth ride at the Bergman Rodeo, and of these, yeah, I think this one's the darkest. Even the Seventh Seal kind of has a bit of an upbeat ending of that life still goes on.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of came into this as a Bergman novice. For all of my efforts to come across as a pretentious film snob, I'd never actually watched any of Bergman's work up until now. Yeah, I've gone 40 years without actually seeing any of Bergman's work from start to finish.
Dang.
Yeah, closest I've gotten is that one super niche joke from Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Okay. Which one you're talking about?
I mean, I haven't seen extensive Bergman, and it's very hard to see Bergman extensively. He had a 50-plus year career. A lot of his films are, well, they're all foreign. They're often kind of downers. My favorite Bergman is Persona, which I feel like is one of those things where I say it, and everyone who knows me and has seen Persona goes, "Yep, that tracks."
Still need to see that. My answer is the proverbial basic answer of Seventh Seal, although I have a weird soft spot for Hour of the Wolf, which I know apparently a lot of people think is one of his weaker movies.
I mean, like Bergman's one of those directors, and this was always the reputation he had to me even before I saw The Seventh Seal in high school. Is like he's like Kurosawa in the like his weaker efforts are probably still better than most people's best stuff.
Sure.
Hmm.
This is not obviously, as I said, my first Bergman. It is, however, my first. I think all three of us. This is our first time through this particular ringer. Is it fair to call this movie a ringer?
It is a very low key ringer, but yes.
Yeah, yeah. It is a film that like it's beautiful to look at, and
Mhm.
it's the performances across the board are very good, but it is, yeah, it is a hard film to watch. It has taken its place among those films that I very much liked or loved and vow never to see again.
Another movie. I was actually gonna. I feel kind of the same ways, and I was gonna compare it to another movie which has that and something else in common, which is uh, Antichrist.
Oh man.
You beat me to it.
You know, and to be fair, as I indicated this in a couple episodes ago, but I will say it again. Lars von Trier is a director who, at this point, I feel like kind of a sucker for defending. So I haven't revisited Antichrist since then. I might be wrong about that, and I'm not gonna.
Just gonna say, I have opinions about Lars von Trier, but we don't need to go into that because
No,
there was a much better director we can discuss.
we can.
The most I'll say is I have heard the halfway decent defense of some of his earlier stuff may still hold up. It's just like post Melancholia is the period where, if I may be blunt, he crawled up his own ass and stayed up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you're right that it's, Todd. You mentioned a second ago. It's very very low key in like a curiously Bergman kind of way. Like the most famous Bergman's most famous film is The Seventh Seal, and it's a movie in which death pops out and says to a guy, "I'm here to claim you." He's like, "How about we play chess about it?" And like neither of them seem that excited or intense about it. It's just sort of like, ah, shit, this fucking guy.
At most, death is almost mildly amused, like, okay, let's see what you do.
If he had suggested Battleship, he would have won.
It's worth remembering, although people forget this when they talk about the inevitability of death in that movie. Death fucking cheats. He like spies on the dude's plan to get to beat him.
That, and there's also that one other moment where it's like he kind of trolled that actor before he kills him.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I think that. How do I put this in a way that won't make me sound like a total fucking dweeb? I mean, there's nothing for it. I am a total fucking dweeb. I know who I am as a person. I feel like I don't know if this is like happening in reverse, but I feel like so Bergman's Swedish, and I feel like a lot of movies from that part of Europe have a similar vibe to Bergman's work, kind of low key, kind of stated, you know.
Mm.
Hmm.
I'm thinking like Wings of Desire is kind of from like similar area. It was released during Bergman's lifetime. It's very a very low key film, very good film, but
Yeah, I can agree with that. Even the more kind of like upbeat movies set, upbeat movies made in sort of like in Sweden and in the region of Scandinavia
Mhm.
kind of have that like have a low key quality about them. That. And now, in saying that, my exposure to Scandinavian cinema as a whole is probably somewhat limited, but I have seen some very good work there, and yeah, I can agree that like even the more kind of like upbeat, enjoyable ones, like there's a movie that I recall seeing many years ago called Together, and it's set in a commune in the 1970s, and it's this sort of wonderful ensemble piece about these people who live in this commune in Stockholm, and how they just kind of like move in and out of each other's lives and their relationships and how they come about, and it's all kind of told from the perspective of one of the children, largely from the perspective of one of the children who lives there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a charming film, but it does have that kind of low key sensibility about it. I remember it really well though, because there's this wonderful moment, kind of like about 2/3 of the way in, when several adults are in the middle of a very complex relationship, and it's kind of feeling like it's coming to a head, and there's a lot of tension in the room, and then someone comes in and just goes, "You'll never guess what I just heard. Franco's dead." And they're like, "What? Franco's dead. I heard it on the radio." And everybody just starts to celebrate.
So I don't get opportunities to tell this story very often. I will never get a chance to on this pod again, so I might as well do it now. My favorite knowledge of Franco, aside from like the recurring SNL, it's such and such a time and Francisco Franco is still dead, is my father was actually in Spain, like right after he died, like within days of his death.
Mm.
And he was in a bar and they were chatting about it. And, someone asked him, he asked, like, how is the new head of the country doing? And guy said, "Yeah, he's doing great." And someone in the back of the bar pipes up, "Yeah, but he's got to be ready to abdicate in 3 days when Franco comes back from the dead."
Oh, jeez.
Oh boy.
You're right, and it is a very it is on paper. It sounds like it should be a very melodramatic film. It's a period drama about this fractured relationship between three sisters, one of whom is dying and has a
Mm.
weirdly attached maid. Stuff's happening there.
Mm.
And then you actually watch it, and the moment of highest intensity of emotion between the characters is when, like, I think it's Agnes and Maria. Is it Agnes? No, it's Cara and Maria.
Mm.
Sort of like
Yeah.
reconcile in the third act, and you don't get to hear anything they say to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also the only moment with some music. Like, there was very little music in this movie.
Mm. Yeah, which I didn't realize. I didn't notice that. But now that you mention it, yeah, reflecting on it, there's a lot of silence. Like,
It's
yeah.
the way it's like it's almost designed to be an oppressive silence where
Mm.
you'll have large stretches where it's just ambient noise. It's clocks ticking, it's footsteps in a hallway, it's breathing, and it's always drawing your attention to the fact that no one is speaking to anybody. No one's saying
Mm-hmm.
anything.
Mm.
I mean, I put down in my notes, and I checked the time code on on the streaming service I was watching it on. It is 3 full minutes until we see a person on screen, and the first spoken dialogue in the film is 9 minutes into the movie. And this is not a long movie. This is not like Drive My Car throwing its title up 40 minutes in. This is a 90-minute movie.
Mm.
So like 10 minutes happening with no dialogue it's a lot. It's a chunk of the movie. And I think that Todd is right. Like, that's intended to draw attention to that fact, to make you realize, like, to watch the way people move and look at each other.
And to call back to what you were saying before, it's actually very telling that what's supposed to be one of the biggest moments of like emotional catharsis, we don't hear what they're saying. We just watch them speaking.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we are able to, we just have to infer what it is they're discussing, and it's heartbreaking when you kind of return to those two sisters again in the last scene that they have sort of alone, and it's Maria, the younger sister, who before was so eager to have some kind of connection, is now the one who wants to pull away. And again, it's just kind of heartbreaking. To your point about like the oppressive soundscape, I never thought I would feel like my stomach get twisted up so often at just the simple tolling of a bell.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you hear this bell, like, and it seems to toll at like just these moments that seem to like note the end of a moment and the beginning of a new one. And it always, it leaves me with this it left me with this terrible sense of dread, because there's this inevitability about what is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you you're kind of you start to dread every time you hear that bell ring, or hear the chime of a clock. There's because it indicates then another movement forward in time. There are a number of extended flashbacks, one for each sister.
And one sort of for
Mhm.
Anna.
Yeah.
but but those flashbacks do not allow you any reprieve
Mm-hmm.
from the sort of oppressive sort of sense of what is destined to happen. That Agnes is going to die, and then what is going to happen after that, because her death is kind of this, it's like this spring that is being pushed down as far as possible to the point of breaking, and then she dies in a truly horrific manner. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's horrific
Oh,
to like, just to, you hear so much of her death throes more than see them, and it's just horrifying.
It's like, if anything, it's almost more effective that we're not holding on her. We're watching this play out in the reactions from her sisters and Anna as they're realizing, oh God, this is it.
Mm. You get that moment of reprieve. They get a moment of reprieve where it feels like, oh, maybe she's okay. She was suffering from some terrible pain, but maybe she's okay. We're going to have her for a little bit longer, and then it just happens again. And yeah, like you say, you're struck with helplessness, the same sort of helplessness that everyone around her feels.
Like one of the things that I noticed, and you're right about the sort of inevitability of it, because like that is very hammered home in those flashbacks. Anna already being sick is a not Anna, Agnes.
Mhm.
Agnes and Anna, they are both they are named similar, and they are also the two most connected characters by a pretty wide margin. Even though the other three are, even though Agnes is sisters to Maria and Karen,
Mm.
so I get them. We'll talk about that later. No, like the fact that Agnes is sick is a constant presence in all of the flashbacks. When we flash back to Maria, Agnes is out in Italy for her health, and like the all of the information we get, because much like previous episode, also a period piece about women, the piano. This movie doesn't like it doesn't have a lot of exposition. Like the only piece of exposition I really noticed is Anna's prayer specifically being set up in a way to inform you that she has a dead kid.
Mm.
Yeah.
But it lets you infer a lot of stuff, and one of the things it lets you infer is that like Agnes has been sick for a very long time and everyone's kind of just gotten used to it. But it's still like a real shock, like when she dies. You're right. It's a harrowing scene. I don't know. And the other thought that I had about, especially about her death scene, and about the scene at the very end where she shows up as like a ghost,
Mm.
is like the movie is more fixated on touch than talking. The thing that Maria uses to try to like connect with Karen is touching her face, and like what ghost Agnes wants is to be held, and Anna's the only one who's willing to do it. And also, both of the two women, Maria and Karen, seem utterly horrified with the premise of their husbands touching them.
Like, so they go about it in different ways, but yes, there's that definite through line of desire slash revulsion towards any sort of physical contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are these moments that really emphasize that point for sure in both the flashbacks, like when Maria's husband returns from his business trip, and he he touches Maria's cheek, and he touches the cheek of their daughter, and he, without saying anything, you're able to infer that he understands that while he was away, she slept with the doctor, with whom she clearly had some kind of love affair several years beforehand.
But who also doesn't seem to like her very much, I suppose I should
No,
mention.
Yeah. He meant like it's funny like in the they have these again. It's to your point there of like desiring contact, but also being revolted by it. In that like they embrace each other passionately, but you know he also talks about how essentially both of them are very different, and their coldness is reflected in the changes to their bodies physically.
It's very telling that the main word he uses to describe her is indifference, and that
Mm,
kind of haunts her throughout the rest of the movie, save for like that
Mm-hmm.
one moment of reconciliation.
mm,
It's to your point, Connor and Todd. It's very much a, I don't even want to call it a hate fuck because he doesn't seem to like hate her. He just seems to like have a mild disdain for her, which
mm.
he exposits about in at length. Although I do have, for a little bit of levity in my notes, is Maria baby? It's cold outsiding the doctor.
When she shows up in a very revealing dress at night, and he's eating. It's very funny to watch him like very much interested in his meal while she is clearly dressed to seduce, and is like, "Oh, the weather's terrible out there. I set up the guest room for you. I'd hate for you to have to travel home in this horrible cold weather. You should." It's perfectly no trouble at all if you want to stay the night here and stay warm. And meanwhile, he's tucking away on his dinner, being like, yeah, sounds good. Yeah.
The implication I think we're supposed to get is that this is like a recurring thing, as you said,
Mm,
which might explain why her husband groks that it happened and is
yeah.
instantly like, well, suicide time.
Well, that's what I was. Yeah, that's something I was. That's what I was kind of thinking about when you mentioned like the desire for touch and the revulsion against touch. Is that we see him. It's the only, like, maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me, if you can remind me if I'm missing anything, but like that brief touch to like Maria's cheek is like the only openly affectionate physical act between either of the husbands with either of their wives.
No, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then he immediately goes to another room and stabs himself.
With a letter opener.
and she just watches like, welp.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that's it that is a that I think that's as blunt a metaphor for what the movie is trying to say as anything else, including like it becomes more and more blunt. I think more and more obvious
Mm-hmm.
as the movie goes on, and then they both kind of have this moment near at the end where it seems like they had this great moment of reconciliation, but one moment of pure honesty and you know, physical and emotional connection does not wipe away decades of the inability to connect.
So this film won best cinematography, which I think is extremely well deserved. It is a, as you
Agreed.
mentioned, it's a beautiful looking movie. But what struck me even more about it is like, you know, it's got very precise camera use. And in particular, I have, again, in my notes, they have the dinner scene between Karen and her husband, and like the the intense loneliness of these two people supposedly eating dinner in two utterly disconnected singles. They could be sitting in different rooms and they wouldn't seem farther apart than they do in that scene.
Yeah, and the overwhelming use of red,
Mm-hmm.
like just to hammer home the anxiety that you, the viewer, should be feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that like I think it's in is Agnes's back like flashback. She mentioned something about like her mother always enjoying being in the red room or what have you, and I was about 45 or 50 minutes in, and I was thinking about that flashback and asking myself which red room, because they're all red and they're all filled with unspoken resentment.
Look, they were poor in Sweden in the, I guess, 1800s. Unclear. They had to subsist off red paint and deep familial resentment. I mean, like you know, red is not an uncommon color in film of this era, especially European film of this
Mm.
era. I'm sure Todd knows where I'm going with this particular tangent. Like it was very common in like giallo films of the 70s.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
But like, you know, it's obvious where that what that's like driving at. You know, they're bloody films, they're horror films, often very over the top horror films. So having a bright red color palette makes a lot of sense. You know, Suspiria is very red, the original, not the remake.
Mm.
But you know, so I guess when I saw like how red the color palette was, I don't know, like some part of me kept waiting for the moment where like where like one of them fucking knifes their husband, or Agnes, like Agnes and Anna's team up to strangle Maria to death for being a little shit.
I'm just trying to picture what a Bergman Giallo would look like, and it's something.
Yeah, I feel like that's what you feed into one of those AI generators to get something that looks neither Bergman nor Giallo, and also steals a bunch.
Yeah.
let, let me destroy a couple acres of forest here so I can get a cool picture of
Beautiful cabin crew.
a Hammer horror movie directed by Ingmar Bergman.
Look, if a few acres of the Amazon rainforest have to burn so that I can do a shitty bit which isn't actually funny, then that's a price worth paying. I hate America. I hate the world right now.
Well,
Anyway,
if I got a movie for you, if you're full of resentment.
oh boy, I mean, like that's the thing. Like, okay, well, I was gonna say, like, I guess I expected it to be more like feel more intense because that's what a red color palette usually means.
Mhm.
But it you know, even in the scenes that are extremely red, it is very low key. You know, the scene where Corin basically like jumps back and forth between like talking about how much she hates Maria to Maria's face, and then like calming down, is an extremely red looking scene. But even when she's like basically having a nervous breakdown in front of Maria,
Mm.
she's doing it very calmly.
Put like that, it's kind of appropriate considering how much this movie is. It is these people kind of reluctantly trying to hide the fact they are all raw nerves and pain right now, and
Mm.
To come back to your discussion of the use of of the color red, I think the color and just the color helps to, I think, emphasize uh almost a like a horror element to all of it, as if, it's a ghost story in which the ghost is just the collective trauma of their childhoods. So, a ghost story.
Hooray for metaphors.
I did film studies. I could extrapolate anything out of anything. But yeah, like it struck me in a way that kind of more traditional horror movies, like for example Midsummer, left me, in that you are just dealing with a very intense amount of loathing and fear and just a sheer inability to communicate, and that just breeds this environment in which horrific things happen. Corin's flashback has a pretty horrific, moment in it. Agnes's death is horrific, like in the way that, I think some horror directors would kill to unnerve viewers the way Bergman does in that scene.
well, I mean, to Ellie's kind of infamous earlier comparison to Antichrist, I was kind of struck by the fact that Bergman, while less graphic, he hangs more on just the, again, it's the discomfort of that moment compared to when Von Trier does it. It's like ripping off a band-aid, whereas Bergman kind of leaves you with the aftermath of stressing, oh god, she's just done this and she does not regret doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
What? Yeah, that's sort of like I am not a super squeamish film goer. You know, I have seen Antichrist, I have seen Inside, I've seen Frontiers. And those are just movies that I've liked. I've watched tons more movies that I didn't like that go even further.
Mm.
So like it wasn't even that it was graphic, though the way it's shot did get me recoiling in my seat a little bit. But like what really struck me after it happened is like she's sitting there and she looks kind of like relieved.
The way she does that moment afterwards, it's almost like she is rubbing in her husband's face.
Mm-hmm.
No, she's already in her face.
Well, that too, but it's kind of that, yeah, I did this, what of it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's that expression on her face of one of satisfaction
Mm-hmm.
that she kind of got one over on him in a way, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, uh, I was not okay. So as someone who has very happily watched any number of horror movies over the years, I was not I was not ready for that much blood.
Mm-hmm.
So you got me there, Mr. Bergman.
You know, I made a brief reference to No Country for Old Men a few minutes ago. And like people talk about No Country for Old Men as like an outlier at the Oscars. You know, it's really dark, it's horrifically and relentlessly violent. It's a huge downer. But like I feel like people have in their head this idea of Oscar films, and I feel like that doesn't line up super often with reality. And like part of it is that people see them as very like stately, subdued, movies like The King's Speech or Shakespeare in Love, movies that are very safe and very tame. And I don't feel like that's always the case. The Godfather is an Oscar winner. That movie is very violent.
Well, it's funny you should mention that as
Mm.
far as this year goes, because guess what was one of the biggest nominees that year?
What was one of the biggest nominees that year?
Tied with the Sting for the most nominees, William Friedkin's The Exorcist.
Hell yeah.
Wow.
This is also the year of Serpico, a little young up and comer who didn't really go very far. Named George Lucas had his first nomination here this year with American Graffiti. Yeah, this was. I mean, this is a great year. The Exorcist, The Sting, this movie. Which yes, I know I don't like rate these movies, but this one's good. Audience surprise. Ingmar Bergman made a good movie. But where was I going with that? Where was I going with that? I mean, like the other. I think this is a little more what people see as Oscar baity. The other way people talk about the Oscars is if they're like really deep and complicated and hard to like understand movies, which I don't think is the case at all. David Lynch never won an Oscar, but Coda sure did.
Yeah. Yeah.
God rest in peace.
Yep.
I can't talk about him right now, or I'm gonna get fucking sad. But like this is a little more like what I think people are thinking of when they think of like Oscar, heavy, hard to understand Oscar films, because like it's not like difficult to grok what it's trying to say, but it is dense in a way, in a way that a lot of other films kind of aren't.
I think that's a good way to put it.
I was also like I went digging around because I saw this, I rolled this up and I didn't look immediately to see what it had won for. I just saw Ingmar Bergman did it and like, okay, that's what we're doing this time. And like I I I was extremely surprised to find out that it won for best cinematography, but not best foreign film. So I go digging. What's the deal with that?
Mm.
It turns out that that Sweden, the way to the audience who might not know, the way the best foreign language film nominees work is each country has to submit their nomination. They each have their own body that does that. They make extremely dumb decisions sometime, like The Handmaiden not getting submitted for South Korea. And they'd actually submitted a different Ingmar Bergman film this year, Scenes from a Marriage, which was disqualified because it played on television before it played in the movie theaters.
Wow.
So, congrats to actual 46th Academy Award Best Foreign Language Film winner, Day for Night. You won by forfeit.
Like, Wheaton, you almost played yourself. You lucked out, but you almost played yourself.
You win by default. The two greatest words in the English language.
Default, default, default. Yeah, that's what the shit that like I get entertained by looking up the Oscar, like the weird edge cases where shit like that happens. This is also the year that a dude like streaked at
Yep.
the Oscars.
Oh, check it out. Apparently there was I'm looking at the Oscars that year now, and apparently there was an Irish documentary nominated for Best Documentary Short Subjects, Pasti ag Obair, which was a documentary short observing children learning through play in an Irish Montessori school in the 1970s.
Huh.
So yeah, babies at work.
If we ever get around to doing that shorts episode, maybe we'll. Oh, it didn't win. Darn it. Well, we'll still talk about
No,
it.
didn't win. 5.5 on IMDb, and as we all know, IMDb ratings are the most accurate judge for film quality.
It's the will of the people, you know.
Plus, plus part of the reason I disqualified shorts, aside from how the fuck am I going to find an hour's worth of talking about a 20-minute short, is like half of them are like fucking impossible to find, tied up in some weird rights hell or whatever.
Weird fun fact. Mary says a short is like the only way John Carpenter has ever actually won an Oscar.
Because God is dead. I'm still surprised that he didn't win like some technical for, I don't know, The Thing.
In his defense, 82 was also the year of like Blade Runner and Star Trek 2, so
It was a
rough
good year.
rough year, yeah.
Also, E.T. was pretty much steamrolling.
They're going to give John Carpenter a Lifetime Achievement Award, Oscar at some point in the next sort of like 5 to 10 years. And he's going to have someone else pick it up in his place because, you know, the PlayStation 8 will have been out and he'll be playing like Gears of War 14 or something, you know?
Or it's like he'll show up and then it's like when they go to present it, he'll find out he stepped outside to take a smoke.
I love, we're off topic now, but we're often off topic. I love John Carpenter's just like open contempt for film bullshit. You know, that quote that he has about how like The Thing is considered like a classic nowadays, and he's like, that's great. Where were you fuckers in '82? Which, in my defense, I was 8 years away from being born, so don't blame me, John.
Yeah, I wasn't even a fetus at that point. I'm sorry, John.
I would have been there, but I was still in the nether realm, waiting for my parents to make a mistake.
I was extremely surprised to like. So at the very end, when Karen and Maria are rejecting, Ghost Agnes's begging them to like hold her, I was extremely amused by Maria's excuse being that she can't leave her husband and kids. Like, your husband that you don't actually seem to like, Maria, your kid who has 5 seconds of screen time. Get real.
Look, the letter opener didn't kill him. I gotta stick around, you know?
I was very surprised to see him standing there. I assumed he died.
The more I thought back, it was like, was her reaction kind of a, oh god, here we go again?
I mean, it could be. It's as I said earlier, a movie that doesn't. It's not going to explain itself to you, which I think is the right tack in certain cases. Let the audience figure shit out on their own. I was also like, I also just appreciated Karen. Maria has this bullshit excuse. Karen, no, I doesn't like you enough. We should probably discuss. Speaking of holding Ghost Agnes, we should probably discuss Anna a little bit at least. What's going on there? What's the deal there?
Like I said earlier today, there were a few moments where I was like, where are we going with this, Lars? No, Lars, Ingmar.
Ingmar. Good directors. I knew that Lars... God damn it, now you have me doing it.
It is such a archetype Swedish name, it sticks.
I know that Ingmar is capable of uncomfortable sapphic undertones. Again, my favorite Ingmar Bergman is Persona. Watch that if you ever want to fucking time.
Challenge accepted.
So obviously I'm extremely gay, and I'm lightly primed to like see it anywhere I look. But like, I understand that it was like the 1800s and women could be more affectionate with each other. She like takes her clothes off to get into bed with Agnes.
Listen, this cisgender heterosexual man talking right here right now, not even I could miss what Bergman was trying to go for there, and I miss a lot of things. Like I am not an observant person.
You could only use the body heat excuse just so far with that before it's like, nope, there's something else here.
Connor, I need you to know that you reading the Gideon the Ninth is one of my like favorite comparison points, because you got like I think it was like 2/3 of the way through before you were like, oh, I get it, they're like in love with each other. Oh, whereas like every single lesbian I've ever had read that book responded like 10 pages in, they want to fuck so bad it makes them stupid.
Not to go off on another tangent, Ellie, but I am also very grateful and also hate you for getting me to read Gideon the Ninth.
Wait till you. I said this in another server. A necromancer puppeting a dead president of the United States is a plot point in those books, and it's not even in the top 10 most insane plot points in those books. So you've got a lot of stuff to wade through before you get to the end of book 3.
I thought you were just making a comment about modern politics in America right now.
Yeah.
Damn it, Ellie, I've been holding off on reading the third one until the final book is out, and now you're tempting me.
What if I told you that a Twitch streamer nukes Melbourne?
What did I just say?
Anyway,
again, modern politics.
back on topic. No, like, so it is extremely, like, again, movie's not going to tell you shit, figure it out, but I do think it's extremely telling that, she's clearly comfortable being undressed in bed with her. When Agnes is in her worst pain, she calls out for Anna, not for her sisters, for Anna. I don't know, like, I think Anna's a fascinating character because she's the one. The movie feels like it's very much a lot about the distinction between what you say and what you feel, and I think Anna is the only character besides Agnes, who is dying, who says what she feels.
Yeah, I think there's something to that.
Yeah,
but also I think the way that fucking Karen's husband talks to her face means that he should be fucking shot.
I mean, that's when you can kind of sympathize with her general sense of screw this guy.
Screw that. Don't screw that guy.
Also, yes.
Don't mutilate yourself, Karen. Mutilate him.
Also, yes.
You ever been so turned off by a dude that you...
See, Ellie, again, if this was the proposed Bergman Giallo, she'd have gone after him with that wine glass, and you're seeing a whole different set of red right there.
Hell yes.
Now I'm sad that Ingmar Bergman never made a Hammer horror movie. He would have loved working with Christopher Lee.
Ingmar Bergman's Frankenstein. I see the vision.
Yeah,
I'd watch that actually.
Yeah, honestly, yeah. Any of like the traditional monsters, yeah. Like Bergman, Bergman would have killed Frank with Frankenstein.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like specifically either Frankenstein or like Jekyll and Hyde, I could see him doing well with.
I was trying to think. I mean, like, how far can I push this? I mean, obviously, like, you can, there's a lot there with the Seventh Seal. I'm like, what Ingmar Bergman, another member of the Worlds Elsewhere theater podcast family, does a series of episodes based on public domain adaptations, and what I was trying to I'm trying to think like what I could like trick her into covering. Let me look at his filmography. Oh, just the Magic Flute. Oh, just the Magic Flute. It has to just be the Magic Flute. Yeah, it's an adaptation of Mozart's opera. Yeah, that's it. That's
the only other one. Unfortunately, the only thing I think of in terms of Bergman and adaptation. Well, number one, he's the one being adapted, and two, neither film in that selection would be considered public domain at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Though again, you can win some bar bets on pointing out the Virgin Spring is technically the basis for Last House on the Left.
Yeah. Speaking of movies that are unpleasant to watch.
Oh yeah. Circling back to the earlier discussion about Agnes and Anna, I don't know if you saw one of the details about that. According to Wikipedia, apparently there is a Swedish commemorative postage stamp depicting those two.
It is specifically depicting the moment where Anna is holding Agnes's dead body
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
in a position reminiscent of the Pieta.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the, like, if you go to read the review of it that Roger Ebert did, who Ebert, surprise surprise, Ebert loved the movie. That's that's the screenshot on the website. That's the shot that they use to illustrate this movie. And it's just, I mean, it's a startling shot. Like, it is,
Mm-hmm.
like, it, there are many moments in the film, and you can tell, I mean, like, it's very clear why it won the Academy Award for Best Cinematography. Like, there are some just gorgeous and gorgeously horrifying shots, like, just single camera, like, shots that just stick with you long after the film is over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, it's very obvious why it won cinematography. I was like, what? It was also nominated for costume design. What did it even lose to?
Well, I got the list pulled up here.
Yeah,
Lost to The
let's see.
Sting.
No, good film.
Good film.
Yeah, it's like this one was like I can see why it's up there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, and we have another connection to previous. I'm just looking over the other winners this year to previous episode. The whatchamacallit, the piano, which had the second youngest person to ever win an Oscar. We have our youngest this year, Tatum O'Neal for Paper Moon,
Oh yeah.
Oh, jeez, that's right.
which I have never seen.
Same.
Oh, that is a great film. Paper Moon, like, it will leave you with feelings the opposite of Cries and Whispers.
Mm-hmm.
Noted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little like I feel like the RNG that I'm working with is like kind of tapping into my mood right now, because like this movie is very heavy. Obviously, the piano isn't like, it's not like the weight of a piano, but it's heavy. And the next couple of them are very, I think it's not till May that we have another episode that I think is light. Yes, I do plan out movies that far in advance. Audience, I'm a crazy person. Leave me alone. We don't record that early. We plan them out. Yeah, I don't. I feel like I had something else I wanted to like. I had other jokes in here that I was gonna like the doctor performing laziness phrenology on Maria's face.
It is kind of one of the more thorough, if understated, reads I have seen in a film.
Mm-hmm. It's just like you're indifferent because of these lines on your forehead, and I'm just like, excuse me, sir. Phrenology was dismissed as quackery 100 years ago.
Bergman had to cut out the part where he compares her to a stagecoach tilter.
I do like that Maria does turn around and be like, I think you just described your own face.
I mean, like the doctor, aside from the three sisters and Anna, no character really gets more than like a handful of minutes of screen time. It is very focused on these four women, and like it does appear that by the time of the plot of the movie, he's like kind of gotten sick of this shit with Maria.
Mm.
Like she straight up comes on him. He's like, "No, leave me alone." I do, as much of a downer as the movie was, I do kind of like, I do like the final scene. It is like,
I'm gonna be honest, I think that's of the flashbacks. I think that's the one that kind of, for lack of a word, it landed the hardest punch for me, just for that final moment of whatever happens afterwards. This is nice knowing, like, this may be the last happy moment these four have together before life just atomizes this entire dynamic.
so there is a movie. I'm going to say the title, and you're all going to immediately know where I'm going with this. Another European movie, Irreversible.
Whew.
Oh.
Very extremely hard to watch movie, which is told in reverse order. So like all of the horrible shit that happens to these characters happens up front, and then you get the earlier scenes of them just being happy and normal, and it turns like the final shot of this girl just hanging out in the park into like genuinely one of the most distressing things I've ever seen in my life. And like that's kind of what the flashback made me think of, but it also like there is something to that, to like even if it's gonna eventually, even if life is eventually gonna drive you apart, I don't know, there is something to finding that happiness in this moment of togetherness with your sisters.
And that's fair. And actually, that is something, again, it's going back to other Bergman, that's kind of there. That is like the strawberry scene in The Seventh Seal, that idea of whatever's going to happen, you kind of hold on to those moments of goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still can't pretend I didn't have that oof moment knowing where this is going on that watch, but I see your point.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Always look on the bright side of life. I feel like I can't end this episode on a fucking Monty Python reference. I can't do that.
It's Monty Python reference or Simpsons reference. Those are the millennial rules. We all know them.
I mean, like your comment about how you could, between the sapphic undertones of this movie and your comment about how you've been to film school, you can make something say anything, did remind me of that one John Mulaney bit. You just raise your hand in class and say, "I think Emily Dickinson is a lesbian," which, I mean, that's not so much inaccurate as imprecise.
Oh.
I mentioned once to my uncle that I was watching the TV show Dickinson, obviously based on Emily Dickinson's life. He's like, I don't know how you make a TV show about her. I mean, I don't know much about her life. Was she sleeping with her sister's husband? I was like, no, she was sleeping with her brother's wife, though.
That'll do it.
Which like that's another show. That's another show that takes place in roughly. I keep saying 1800s. When does this film take place?
On to Wikipedia.
19th century. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, I'm right. I think that like any period drama about women in this time period is inevitably going to be either kind of a downer or lying to you, because like how do you engage with the world when you have no choices in life, and the movie doesn't emphasize that, but there's like a beat where Karen says like, well, I wanted to give the maid a bonus for having worked so faithfully this whole time, and he's like, no.
Mm.
Her husband just instantly shuts her down without a question because he sucks.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're both kind of like, toss her out, we're done.
Yep.
Which is just a huge bummer. I hope Anna's going to be okay. She deserves it.
Of all the characters, she is the only one who deserves it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of, it's like, I would not be opposed to Maria and Karen kind of sorting themselves out, but at that moment, it's, no, just let Anna have this.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah. As for the husbands, one sucks and the other blows, so...
Yeah, I mean, like, so when I say that any period, like, as a queer person, I love Regency romances, and like, I like the idea of sapphic Regency romances, but there's always just this like niggling feeling in the back of your head that like, nah, man, this is what life for women was kind of like back in the 1800s or whatever. And that's been on my mind a lot lately for some reason. But I guess if I'm going to take away something positive from this film, which Wikipedia has, just as I was browsing over it for a final talking point, has informed me that is based on Ingmar Bergman's mother.
I have questions, Ingmar.
Well, I guess because his mother's name is Karen,
Mm-hmm.
but all four women are supposed to like represent aspects of his mother that he remembers growing up.
I don't know how else to put this, but men will literally make a Oscar-winning period drama rather than go to therapy.
You think that's an interesting tidbit? How about the fact that this was distributed in the United States by Roger Corman?
I mean, considering the number of doors Corman opened for people, that one's not as shocking. I will say, as far as the Bergman's mother thing, That is still not the weirdest thing I've ever seen a director do with regards to their mother, but it's up there.
I mean, the 70s were a time when what are now considered like kind of arty films were actually kind of big business. This was the
Mm.
time period where Golan Globus hired Jean-Luc Godard to do an adaptation of King Lear. And if you want to know how that went, the audio over the opening credits is Golan's voicemail to Jean-Luc Godard begging him to stop being such a weirdo and wasting all their money. Because God, that movie fucking slaps. My point is that like I can see how Roger Corman, who as Todd said, opened a lot of weird doors to people.
He kind of midwifes modern Hollywood.
Yeah, like he
Yeah, he's kind of like a finishing. Yeah, he was like a finishing school for like the '70s New Hollywood,
Mhm.
and also really popular in France for his adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe films, like Edgar Allan Poe stories.
Oh yeah, his Mask of the Red Death is a banger.
Mm.
And like I think that if you're one of those people who goes around banging your pots and pans about how Jaws and Star Wars ruined cinema, you probably hate Roger Corman's guts. But I can never like whatever else you can say about him. I can say lots of good things about him and probably some bad things if I wanted to. He was one of the most important eras in what a lot of people consider to be like one of the last really great eras of Hollywood. And you can see a lot of that in the nominees this year. As I said, George Lucas is up here. Francis Ford Coppola produced American Graffiti, which is up here. Marlon Brando was up for Last Tango in Paris.
I mean, if you want to connect those dots there, by that regard, we wouldn't have a lot of the really big Latter Day Kurosawa films without Corman getting Lucas through the door.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah, hey, I give Roger Corman his flowers. I just it always kind of surprises me whenever I see his name pop up for something like this, because I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He was like really into art house cinema too.
Yeah,
He just was also responsible for some of my favorite schlock. A man of layers.
What you're saying is that Roger Corman is a land of contrasts?
he possesses multitudes.
And having ended this episode on the prophesized Simpsons reference, look, you were right. It was going to happen. Todd, do you have anything you'd like to plug?
At the moment, no. Although I gotta say, the idea of actually doing a deep dive into how Corman basically the house that Corman built, it has been kind of on my mind for a while now, and this is starting to get me back in that groove. So thank you and curse you all at once.
Love you too, Todd. Connor, do you have anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me on Blue Sky, and really only Blue Sky now. And the username is at Young Mr. Duffy. Also, my wife Catherine and I, we have an itch.io page. We are Third Country Press. We recently released our most recent little 4-page zine for Pay What You Want. A lot of our stuff is Pay What You Want.
Mm-hmm.
And as we record this, we are getting ready to develop a brand new game, which is going to be produced as part of a TTRPGs for Trans Rights in Ohio game jam. So
Nice.
very, very much excited about that. I am on my creative kick again, which is nice.
Excellent.
As always, you can find me, Ellie, on Tumblr at Football in Tuxedos with dashes between the words. You can find me on Blue Sky, Medium, and Letterboxd at LSR42. And you can find this podcast on Blue Sky at Biggest Night Pod. We are available on both Spotify and YouTube. And if you follow us on YouTube, be sure to give us a subscribe, maybe like and comment on the videos so that you can tell me which parts you like and which parts you don't.
And in the spirit of come what may, finding happiness, thank you both for coming out with me tonight. But as I said, the RNG is right now kind of sending me into a downer kick. So join us next time as we go back to 1947 for the Elia Kazan film Gentleman's Agreement, which I think you'll be surprised that I and one of the other guests have a fairly direct connection to. Hope to see you there.